hologram, virtual reality, computer-generated acoustic environments, and remote-controlled robots. Communication between humans and computers has not always been easy. In the early days, exchanging information meant throwing switches and punching out programming cards. The latest human-computer interface is virtual reality. In this system, electronic helmets and data gloves take over from the mouse and the keyboard. The communications between a computer and its user are usually carried out in alphanumeric data, that is, letters and numbers. This data, displayed on a screen, is manipulated by means of a keyboard and a mouse. Virtual reality is a new interface technology that greatly enhances user-computer communications. It immerses the user into a three-dimensional representation of the data, into a surrogate environment, so to speak. Virtual reality allows the user to move about, see, hear, and even touch and handle the objects in that environment. Virtual reality lets you explore an environment as you would in the real world, except that in this case, the environment is virtual, which means it exists only in the computer's memory. You need special equipment to enter into a virtual reality environment. You put on a helmet that presents each eye with built-in liquid crystal display screens. Each screen presents the same scene, seen under a slightly different angle. This kind of system gives depth to what the user sees. But the most amazing thing about virtual reality is that it gives you the feeling you are totally immersed in that virtual world. If you turn your head to the left, you see what would normally be on your left. The same is true no matter which direction you turn. To achieve this, the computer has to know at all times where the user is looking. A built-in device on the helmet tracks the user's head movements and feeds the information to the computer. This device consists of a transmitter and a receiver. The transmitter is placed near the user. It generates an electromagnetic field in 3 directions, each perpendicular to the other 2. The receiver is mounted on the helmet. It consists of 3 coils of wire placed at right angles to each other. When a magnetic field passes through a wire coil, it generates an electric current proportional to the field's strength. The strongest currents are produced when the orientation of the 3 coils coincides with that of the transmitter's magnetic fields. The strength of the electrical charges produced by each coil will determine the position and orientation of the user's head. This data is fed into the computer. The data allows the computer to determine the view the user should be seeing. This system is also used to determine the position of the hands in space. The receiver is fastened on top of the hand. To manipulate virtual objects, however, you need an additional tool called a data glove. The data glove tells the computer the position of the user's fingers and their exact location in space. The glove is made of lycra and fits snugly around the hand. A set of sheathed fiber optic cables run along the back of each finger. Connected to a constant light source, each cable runs up the back of the hand and over 1 knuckle on each finger, and then loops back to the light source. The light source is then converted into electrical signals that are transmitted to the computer. When you bend a fiber optic cable as you would a finger, the light circulating in the cable tends to escape through small scores or cuts in the cable sheath. The more the knuckle bends, the more light escapes, and therefore the less light reaches the photosensor. This lowers the electrical signal transmitted to the computer. The computer can interpret the light signal data to figure out the precise position of the fingers. The data glove enables you to grasp and manipulate virtual objects. But virtual reality also lets you feel the objects you are holding. A device attached to the fingers produces tactile stimulations. The sensor consists of a series of small coils, similar to those used in loudspeakers, which vibrate at varying speeds and frequencies. These vibrations allow the user to distinguish between a hard object and a soft one, for instance. Of course, the computer controls this vibrotactile stimulation device. As soon as it receives data from the data glove, telling it that the user's hand is around an object, the computer triggers a command that vibrations be sent to the fingers touching the object. To make the simulation even more realistic, the sounds associated to the environment being explored are played in the headphones. These sounds may even originate in the virtual world. Virtual reality is a heady, multi-sensory experience. It is so astoundingly realistic that you completely forget all the paraphernalia you have to wear to experience it. Virtual reality can be used for telepresence, scientific research, education, and of course, fun. Not surprisingly, artists have been among the first to pounce on the new technology. Musicians, for instance, are creating virtual acoustic environments and futuristic instruments. What music lover hasn't wished she could get the full richness of a cathedral's acoustics when simply enjoying a recording of her favorite chamber music? That wish has now become a virtual reality. Indeed, scientists have developed a system that can simulate the acoustics of various environments. This means we will be able to curl up in our favorite armchair and listen to chamber music with the feeling that we are actually sitting in a majestic cathedral. Essentially, what the system does is add reverberation to pre-recorded sound. The reverberation is what would normally occur in the room to be simulated. To create this type of simulation, first you have to describe the room to the computer. The description specifies the room size and geometric perimeter, as well as the degree of sound absorption of its surfaces. A surface's degree of sound absorption depends mainly on the type of material it is composed of. Some materials, such as carpet fabrics, absorb sound, whereas others, such as stone, reflect it. The computer is also told of the location of the musicians and audience in the virtual room. Informed of all these specifications, the computer determines the characteristics of the reverberation the virtual room produces. The reverberation begins with a series of short and immediate echoes, followed by diffuse and long-lasting reverberation. In a small room, the echoes occur very early and help to pinpoint the sound source. By contrast, in a large room, it takes them more time to reach the listener's ears. As for the diffuse reverberation, it seems to come from everywhere. It lasts longer in a large room than in a small one, as it does in a room with sound-reflecting walls than in one with absorbing walls. As mentioned earlier, the computer must be given all the specifics of the room in which the simulation will take place, including the position of the loudspeakers in relation to the listener. This data is important because the computer commands each speaker to emit a particular combination of early echo and diffuse reverberation. Indeed, only a few of the 6 loudspeakers around the listener will produce the echo, for instance. With this kind of simulation system, a computer will be able to satisfy a listener's every whim. Computers can also help musicians augment and expand their performance virtuosity, especially when it exceeds the realm of traditional musical instruments. Excited by the possibilities, researchers have developed hyper-instruments. In this case, a violin linked up to a computer. The violin-computer combination expands the range of sound effects an instrumentalist can control. In a hyper-instrument, the interaction between the player and the computer is based upon the principles of virtual reality. The player asks the computer to produce the desired sounds by simply varying his or her interpretation. To achieve this, the computer must be constantly informed of the violinist's gestures and hence intentions. A first device mounted on the end of the neck of the violin is used to determine the violin's orientation based on the strength of the terrestrial magnetic field it detects. A second sensor measures the position of the bow. This device consists of 2 small magnets mounted on the heel and point of the bow. In addition, a detector fastened under the violin's sound box measures the magnetic field coming from these small magnets. A bracelet on the musician's arm measures the extension and flexion of the wrist.
Try playing, let's try it. I can even...
Unlike a traditional violin, the hyperviolin radiates no acoustic energy. The vibrations of the top plate are measured with a piezoelectric polymer, providing an electrical signal that sounds like a violin.
Let me try it a second.
These signals, together with the measurements from the bow and the player, are transmitted to the computer, where they are calibrated and analyzed. Their interpretation tells the computer what changes it must make to the instrument's natural sound. Such changes might include adding reverberation or melodic accompaniment composed of synthesized sounds. The resulting sound is finally transmitted through a series of loudspeakers. Like acoustic environment simulations, hyper-instruments are virtual instruments that produce sounds that are possible only with the assistance of computer intelligence. Virtual reality offers the artists of the 21st century possibilities that are simply mind-boggling. It will also help to fine-tune existing technologies, such as telerobotics and simulation learning. There are instances where something needs to be done, but in an environment that is dangerous to human beings. Telerobotics is the perfect answer to situations like these. Telerobotics combines the power and flexibility of a robot with the intelligence and dexterity of a human being. The principle of operation of a telerobotic system is simple. On the one hand, you have a robot in a potentially dangerous environment. The robot is equipped with 2 video cameras for eyes and microphones for ears. The images and sounds the robot picks up are transmitted to an operator in a laboratory who is wearing a stereoscopic display and headphones. The human operator sees and hears everything the robot sees and hears, and has the distinct impression he or she is where the robot is. Telerobotics offers a great deal more. A robotic arm and hand can be made to emulate human hand gestures from a distance, or perform a delicate task such as repairing a high-voltage wire, for instance. To do this, the operator inserts his arm and hand into a device that measures the position and force applied by these parts of the body. This device is called the master arm. It consists of a series of sensors which transmit to the computer the position of the shoulder, elbow, wrist, thumb, and middle finger, as well as the force applied. The computer translates the data into position control commands that are transmitted to the robot. The robot will then faithfully reproduce the operator's movements. In addition, if the object held by the robot is very heavy, the computer will magnify the force applied by the operator. In addition, the resistance felt by the robot is transmitted to the operator by means of small hydraulic motors mounted along the master arm. To perform tasks requiring great dexterity, however, the operator wears a device on his hand that precisely measures the movements of his fingers. This device consists of an assembly of metal links that fits over the user's hand. Each link consists of a magnet that generates a magnetic field and a sensor attached to each finger joint. Each sensor changes its signal output voltage in proportion to the magnetic field it is experiencing. As the finger joint bends or straightens out, the magnet moves closer or farther away from the sensor. As a result, the voltage induced in the sensor varies. The signals from all the finger joint sensors are sent to a computer. The computer interprets them and almost instantly determines the degree of flexion of each finger joint. More recently, a group of researchers developed another system which reproduces the force normally applied in handling an object on the operator's fingers. The way it works is simple. Cables activated by small motors pull one or another of the bands around the operator's fingers. The application of these forces gives the operator the sensation that he is really touching the object, although the object is in fact virtual. A device may also be attached to the exoskeleton, which allows the operator to remote control a robotic arm. This device measures the operator's arm and forearm movements. It consists essentially of a series of potentiometers attached at the shoulder and elbow. These potentiometers precisely measure the angles of the shoulder and elbow in every direction the anatomy of the arm allows. These measurements are transmitted to a computer, which interprets them. Once the movements have been identified, the computer translates the data into arm movement commands it sends to the robotic arm. Telerobotics is but one of the many applications of virtual reality. Virtual reality has proven to be extremely useful in architecture, for example. It allows architects to walk through the buildings they design before they are even built. Virtual reality gives them a much more accurate idea of what the final structures will be like than a technical drawing ever could. It allows them to correct minor miscalculations, the height of a window, for instance, or the width of a door, details that might have gone unnoticed on paper and that would have been difficult to fix once the building was completed. Virtual reality is also a valuable training tool for such complex tasks as piloting an airplane, for instance. Indeed, it gives trainees an opportunity to perfect their skills. Thanks to the visual, sound, and tactile sensations produced by the system's various devices, pilots feel they are at one with their machine. The amazing realism of these sessions help them to assimilate their technical skills. Similarly, a surgeon can practice delicate surgery by operating on a virtual patient. Virtual reality enables the surgeon to examine the organs to be operated on from every possible angle. Moreover, since the virtual patient is entirely computer-generated, no human life is at stake. Virtual reality is a rapidly growing technology. Given its incredible potential, it is bound to soon become a part of our everyday lives. Someday, a physician in Boston will be able to perform surgery on a patient in an OR in Montreal. Let's hope that by then, communication breakdowns will be a thing of the past.